It is Saturday, as promised, in 100-degree weather, well, 90 something. This is going to be a rather messy little explanation that I hope will still be useful to you of iambic pentameter. And I wanted to just start by telling you why I'm having you try your hand at writing it. In my experience, first of all of you have been working for various amounts of time with Shakespeare's text, reading it, and most importantly, acting it and saying it out loud. And really, as you're doing this, it's so repetitive, right? You're taking in the meter, and I want you to become more conscious of it and how it has been influencing the way that you're experiencing the words and even sometimes the images that are described in the text. And in order to, one of the best ways to do that is to try your hand at writing it. So that's why I'm asking you to try. I'm not asking you to achieve any kind of perfection here, but I'd like you to give you an honest try at writing some lines in iambic pentameter. So the other thing that's interesting about iambic that I just want to say is it's very natural. And if you listen to people talk, you may be amused to find that sometimes they are saying iambic pentameter lines, and they often are speaking in an iambic rhythm. It's very much the rhythm of English. And it was super trendy in Shakespeare's day, iambic pentameter. So everybody everybody aspired to compose in this particular rhythm. It's a little bit like the hip hop of its day. Okay, so here we go. So iambic pentameter, as we've said, is a way of talking about 5 metric feet. A foot in any poetry is a unit of 2 syllables. Sometimes it's 3, but in this case, it's a foot, it's 2 syllables. And then we have 5 of them, so we have 10-syllable lines. This is the default that Shakespeare uses. And of course, he deviates from it, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the default, as we've said, is 5 iambic feet. So going da-da, 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 da-da. We've practiced that together. So long, short, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, or you could think of it as unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, right? But da-da, 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 da-da. As in hello, that's an iamb. And a trochee, which is another type of foot that Shakespeare uses, is the reverse. So it's da-da, long, short, or stressed, unstressed. And in fact, I won't go into this in depth, but when Shakespeare uses trochees as the actual default meter, he does it for otherworldly beings like the witches in Macbeth. Double, double, toil and trouble, right, is help me, da-da, not da-da. Okay, so most of the time we're dealing with iambs, but Shakespeare throws in trochees, right? And the thing that you should keep in mind is that there are deviations. And the idea is that when the heartbeat, da-da, 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 gets disturbed because of strong emotion of many different types. You're in love, you're angry, you're surprised, you're unsure of something, then the character will sometimes speak a line that is more irregular, as if their heart is in fact reacting by throwing off the heartbeat in some way. I'm just going to teach you 2 standard deviations to make it very simple for you. One is that lines sometimes begin with trochees, and a very typical way that might happen is if you are giving a command, like don't do that. You wouldn't say don't do that, you say don't do that. And you'll see that when Shakespeare is commanding, he often starts the line with a trochee. And there are other reasons why he might start a line with a trochee, but a line in which you end up not going da-da, but da-da, don't do that, my darling, right, is fairly standard. The second type of line, like deviation, that is really very typical is what's sometimes called a feminine ending, in which there's an extra syllable that's tacked on to the last part of the line. So In a minute we'll get to them, but basically instead of going da 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 and ending on a stressed beat, it goes da 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 da. And there's this little like trailing syllable, which usually connotes some kind of being off balance. If you really are off balance, if you were to be marching, right? Instead of putting your foot down, you end up with your foot in the air. There's this kind of tentativeness to a feminine ending, okay? So what I'd like you to do right now is to jump right in and try to scan these lines. I'll start with the first one for you, right? Oh, spite, too old to be engaged, too young. Oh, spite, too old to be engaged, too young. That scans. As Max has pointed out to us, we wouldn't say that. We'd be like, oh, spite, too old to be engaged, too young. But if you follow the stresses, they're there where I put them, okay? So this one scans. I'd like you now to stop this tape for a moment and treat this as an exercise. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be very useful to you. And see how these do or don't scan. I would say that at least 2/3 of them scan in iambic. And there are some deviations. See if you can find them, okay? So stop the tape and have fun. Then come back and I will show you the key. Okay, welcome back. Here we are to the line scanned. So I'm just going to do this for you again. Oh, spite, too old to be engaged, too young. You can hear how that does. And as I said, oh, spite, too old to be engaged, too young. But you see how that does fit, even though I'm not saying it in the same exaggerated way. The second one, but she, being mortal, of that boy did die. I would say that scans, but notice I had to do something sort of tricky. Being, I pronounced as one syllable. And this is the kind of thing that Shakespearean actors will do because they're trying to sort of stick with the meter. And if I didn't do that, the whole line would go to hell in a handbasket also. But we won't get into that. You can ask me about that in class. But she, being mortal, of that boy did die. So that scans. It's not enough. It's not enough, young man. Again, that scans. Is not enough? Is not enough, young man? Right? Neglect me, lose me, only give me leave. That scans. Neglect me, lose me, only give me leave. Can you hear how it does scan even when I'm saying it in a more natural way? Or especially in a way, right? And then this one here we could argue about, but I like to say that it scans. With bracelets of thy hair rings God's conceits. I personally love that line. And I would say that the normal thing that sort of breaks down a little bit here is you could say, of bracelets of thy hair rings God's conceits. So hair rings God's conceits. You could stress all of them. But I would say this basically scans, and there's something about the rhythm that carries along all of those nouns. With bracelets of thy hair rings God's conceits. So again, we could argue about whether this scans or not, but I think it does. This is the way I like to think about it. So I, being young till now, ripe not to reason. Did you catch the feminine ending there? And here's a character who's a little bit perturbed. She's like, so I'm young, and not really. I'm not in full command of my reason. So I, being young, till now not ripe to reason. So they've got that extra thing. You're noticing how I'm putting in bold the stressed syllables, right? Okay. Oh, once tell true, even for my sake. Did you notice? Did you see what I did? This one was a trick one, like the one about, but she being mortal, right? I said being mortal, so made being into one syllable. And here I'm doing the same thing with even. Oh, once tell true, even for my sake. Okay, so again, some scansion, like what we're doing, is sort of like the macho of poetry. I like to make it as simple as possible. And in order for this line to work easily, and then the way I think a Shakespearean actor would say it, you just sort of mumble the even in for my sake so that it stays in the right place. Here's another one. If I say, who will not change a raven for a dove, I'm saying something sort of weird because it's a question. So you'd say, who will not change a raven for a dove? So this is a trochee. Who will not change a raven for a dove? If you look carefully, the only thing that's changed here are the first two syllables. They've flipped. Who will not change a raven for a dove? But it creates this little da-da. Who will not change a raven for a dove? So that's an example of a trochee. And then notice, this comes from our play. These all other ones came from Midsummer Night's Dream, but this one, to spite a raven's heart within a dove. That's Orsino talking to Olivia about how he's going to kill Viola in order to make Olivia sad. Shakespeare does this. He quotes from himself. It's such a similar line, right? And you'll find, as you keep reading Shakespeare, which I so hope you will do, you will start finding, and it's very pleasurable, places where he is borrowing from himself. Lines that he likes, he sometimes recycles. Okay, so this one, those of you who are in Stack 5, you looked at this. This is Ophelia. After she's had the horrible encounter where she believes that Hamlet has lost his mind. And I think this one also is really worth your stopping and spending a few minutes with. You're going to find here too that most of these scan and a few of them don't. And it's really interesting to look at how that works. So please stop the tape again, spend a few minutes on this, see what you can figure out. And then we will get back together in a moment and discuss. Okay, so welcome back. And first I'm just going to read this out loud. Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. The expectancy and rose of the fair state. The glass of fashion and the mold of form. The observed of all observers quite down, an eye of ladies most deject and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music vows, now see that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh, that unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me! To have seen what I have seen, see what I see. So that's what it might sound like to some degree if it were said without self-consciousness. And I actually don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, but I'm going to see if I can walk you through this in a way that you understand it without giving you a visual. So see if this works. Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. That scans, right? The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. That also scans. This is like the one about like the gods and you could say eye, tongue, sword, and you could say all three of those are stressed. But I think it's enough to just say the courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. So there you go. The expectancy and rose of the fair state. This one probably messed you up, right? Because you have to slide together the and X, the expectancy and rose of the fair state. So that kind of like contraction of the first two syllables is what makes the whole thing scan. If you don't do that, you end up with the expectancy, and it gets really off. So, but as soon as you do that, as you put them together, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, then you're good. Okay, so that's how that scans, just by contracting those two. The glass of fashion and the mold of form, all of this is scanning. The observed of all observers quite down. I would say all of these scan. And I of ladies most deject and wretched. So can you hear the feminine ending there? Most deject and wretched. That's the extra syllable. And of course, she's saying she is miserable and wretched. So it would make sense that here her heart is breaking and she can't be decisive. She's sort of, it's like a tear that's the last syllable falling off of wretch. That sucked the honey of his music vows. Can you hear that scans? That sucked the honey of his music vows. Now see that noble and most sovereign reason. Do you hear the feminine ending? That see that noble and most sovereign reason would be the way it would scan to 10 syllables, but it's got an 11th. Now see that noble and most sovereign reason. Like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh, right? Like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. That scans. That unmatched form and feature of blown youth, that scans. Okay, so now we get to line 11. Blasted with ecstasy, oh woe is me. Notice that this is part of a longer sentence. I of ladies most dejected and wretched, now see that noble and most sovereign reason. Blasted with ecstasy is really the sentence. And so we've actually been waiting for this verb for a long time. But much more important than that, this is really the center of the speech, because what she's saying is, first she's describing the gorgeousness of Hamlet and the beauty of his mind, and now she's lamenting that she has seen him go mad. Ecstasy here is madness. He is blasted with ecstasy. And not surprisingly, this line, full of meaning and emotion, has jumped out of the heartbeat. It's not blasted with ecstasy. It's blasted with ecstasy, oh woe is me. And in fact, there's also a caesura in the middle. The sentence stops, blasted with ecstasy, oh woe is me. So much is done to draw attention to this. But from the point of view of meter, only something quite small has happened, and it's still made us feel this in a huge way. So the first two syllables, the first foot, is a trochee. Blasted rather than blasted, right? Blasted with ecstasy, oh woe is me. And in that trochee is this incredible heartache. And now here we are at the last line. To have seen what I have seen, see what I see. Did you notice as I said that I was contracting the first two words, or the infinitive, to have seen rather than to have seen? Because then I would end up with to have seen what I have seen, and totally throws it off. But all I need to do is to pronounce, and this is what an actor would do, is to pronounce these two words together. To have seen what I have seen, see what I see. And there I am. It's all scanned. It really wasn't that difficult. But I hope that this has been a little bit helpful for you to go through with me. And I just want to say that I feel like the work that you've done has set you up to be able to appreciate how this structure, this underlying structure that Shakespeare relies on, helps him to create a sense of emotion in the people who are. I hope it's happened to you as you've been acting these words, that these small variations in the meter have caused you to feel things, and also the listener is going to experience that along with the actors. So I hope as you're trying your hand at this, you see how there are all of these wonderful dynamic possibilities in these tiny changes in a very regular meter.